or mixtures of classes, or, you know. So I just wanted to make that point first of all, just so it's not, doesn't seem like some esoteric historical question, you know. Especially considering the fact that the downfall of the Russian Revolution, I think, you know, is such a profound, you know, effect on the world situation. Downfall of Russia, even in 1990, you know, huge repercussions that are all pretty much all negative, in my view. Now, as far as Lenin and Trotsky, I don't believe that Stalin had much of a political position on much of anything until he actually started becoming the spokesman for the bureaucracy. He initially, before the revolution had happened, he was one of the ones who was instigating this alliance with the Mensheviks and the provisional government with the Bolsheviks, or through the Mensheviks. But you know, the whole thing, the different political positions, he's not someone who had a whole lot of positions, in our view. He was kind of, he was a good propagandist at times, but in general he was not a theoretician. And there's not a whole lot of theoretical works you're going to find from Stalin in general, or at least that were genuinely written by him. Stalin was, in fact, didn't disagree with Trotsky on anything as far as a world revolution, how we can't have socialism in one country, until, in our view, until the bureaucracy needed some kind of tool within their own ranks that was going to represent their interests, their new conservatism, which reflected this new bureaucracy, reflected the tiredness of workers who didn't want to do anything else, who were, as Lenin said, declassed because of the war, who were, you know, and you know, the middle class layers that only had interest in their perks and privileges. And for that reason, all of a sudden the theory started to change. And world revolution wasn't what was on the map anymore. It was about self-defense at all costs. So that's, in our view, this is completely opposite of what Lenin was for. And in that sense, Lenin, and so it doesn't matter who, he would have, you know, endowed Trotsky with the crown of communism. The real question is, who was representing the policies of Lenin? You know, who was representing, not just of Lenin, but of the revolutionary working class, you know, worldwide and in Russia. And in our view, that was Lenin, and you know, after Lenin and during, for much of the time, Leon Trotsky. So that's the real question in our view. So yeah, at a certain point, Stalin started to get all kinds of interesting theoretical ideas out there, but in general, they were just kind of pragmatic. Well, we need to exist now, so what do we do to exist? Well, you know, I talked to Greg a little bit on the phone. We talked about, you know, a lot of the zigzags of the Soviet bureaucracy, which, in my view, had nothing to do with revolution. They had to do maybe with self-defense of the nation, but it certainly wasn't the internationalism of Che. It certainly wasn't the internationalism of Lenin. In my view, you know, the deal with Stalin and Hitler was, in my view, was one of the biggest crimes in Stalin history. And you know, working with the imperialists almost a year, what was it, 2 years later, the American Communist Party has a completely opposite view. You know, against the war, turned into against the war against the people or something, with siding with the United States. You know, Roosevelt went from a fascist to a progressive bourgeoisie in like 2 years, I think. And in my view, this has nothing to do with socialism. This has to do with the interests, the foreign policy interests of a conservative bureaucratic clique in Russia. Much like in a union, where you'll find in every union, basically, especially in this country where there's very little within the unions, that it's a bureaucracy. It's a self-serving bureaucracy. I do feel like there's a lot of possibilities, even within a bureaucracy, within a bureaucratic workers' state. You know, if you look at Cambodia now, you know, good Lord, it's awful. What the imperialists have done to that country. Say what you want about, you know, well, I guess you could say a lot about some of the people that led that Aung San. But if you're talking about even the Vietnamese, when they controlled Cambodia and led it like a Soviet government, I mean, that was, I mean, as horrible as that was, I mean, look at what it is now, you know, so.
All right, so my question is, So you guys support unions, basically, within, as long as they're moving towards a socialist, they have a socialist agenda, or at least you try to push a socialist agenda. Would it be beneficial to actually try for some type of syndicalism, where the actual workers own the factories, rather than having bosses to actually report to and have to work with a different bureaucracy?
Yeah, that's the thing. I wanted to qualify that. I actually don't, honestly, I don't think unions should be socialist, especially at this stage. I think in general, unions need to be what they are. I mean, the unions are they have a limitation. There's a lot of limitations, I should say, to what they are. They're not a political party in our view. They can't represent, like they can't be like a political movement in and of themselves. They represent the united front of workers of every political persuasion fighting for their rights as the producers of wealth. It's the exact mirror reflection of the monopolies and the syndicates and whatever that the capitalists have. So we're not in favor of turning these unions into socialist unions. What we are in favor of, though, is at least at this stage, certainly at this stage. At this stage, what we want is to get as many workers into these unions, reorganize, build the unions up to what they were in the 50s, build them up to way more. Get every damn worker in the country unionized, if possible, regardless of what they're, even if they're teabaggers, I don't care. Get in a union, So I mean that's what they are. They're a united front. We build it as a united front, but at the same time, as we build those united fronts, we also maintain our own specific tendency, our own specific Marxist core. And when we're talking to workers, we always feel like explaining, like bringing socialism to the workplace, bring it to the union is the best way to make it strong. The way to make it stronger. So. But that, again, what we want right now is not just to make it into a socialist union. In fact, we feel like at this stage it would alienate workers from unions because they don't know what it is, and that they can't do it if they don't know what it is. But while we're in the unions, that's what we do. We try to maintain that cohesive Bolshevik center and explain it to them patiently, the way Lenin said. What is socialism? What are we for? What do we represent? This is our tendency. This is what we represent. We're also part of this left opposition current. We think that you should be part of that. Basically taking workers where they're at and maybe going a little bit further. So that's how we function in unions. That's why why we're so in favor of a labor party. Why it's so important to get something that represents our interests, something that we can, But what happens? We go on strike. And we get militant and we occupy a factory. Maybe it doesn't go as well as UE. Maybe some, here in Utah, some Republican says, okay, well, let's bring in the SWAT team, Who knows? A Democrat could do it too, So, what do we need is a party that actually represents the union. So what happens then? Is someone going to actually go against the union that brought them to power? Maybe. But it's going to be a hell of a contradiction. They're going to have to deal with that when they, run for election again, The real constituency is working people. So that's why we think while the trade unions can represent a very elementary level of working class organization on the economic front, the Labor Party is so fundamental on the political. It unties that one hand from the back of the boxer, I guess. I don't know where that was going.
Yeah, just an observation I'd like you to comment on. It seemed to me like one of the huge criticisms you have of Stalin is the fact that he's a party member and he's disconnected from the working class. How is it that what you've just proposed about having a labor party and then having non-political unions not going to immediately create that contradiction?
I think a labor party on a non-socialist basis will be riveted with contradictions. It'll be probably, look at the Labor Party in Britain. Good Lord, People call us imperialists because we participate in the labor union in England because of their horrible policies in Iraq and whatever, which is really just a Blair clique on top. and other sections of it that have supported Blair in the past, which we completely oppose, 100% within the Labor Party. But no, I don't think that. I think there's a lot of things that will happen that are probably not good with just a non-socialist Labor Party that appears. But it's an elementary step. It's the beginning. I don't think that workers are going to be able, in their present state, where they're at right now, are going to be able to move towards socialism without some kind of vehicle that represents their interests, even in a distorted way. I do think that, here's the thing too, I wanted to mention as far as Stalin and Stalinism and the worker states, we do call them, that's true, deformed worker states, proletarian Bonapartist states, whatever. But it doesn't mean we don't think like the Chinese Revolution was one of the greatest events in human history. We do.